Yeah, what is the little way? Well, one thing to perhaps be stated first, the autobiography, we read the autobiography in our modern humanities course, and we've just come out of various texts, but just come out of Nietzsche, out of Max Weber's vocation lectures, and we're sort of, I think it's fair to say we're battling with modern ideas, modern pathologies. And one thing that we did in class today was to just recognize that the autobiography begins with something that one might want to call a primary human reality. And what is that primary human reality? It is to be a daughter, to be born into a family, to be a child. The first thing that we really all are we're newborns. We are immediately thrown into relationships with our parents. Perhaps we have siblings. We know ourselves first and foremost in those roles and in those relationships. That stands in stark contrast to what we've just read when we think about Max Weber or Nietzsche, or even if you think about early modern writers, political writers such as Hobbes, who doesn't even bring up the family at all, doesn't bring up children. Rousseau brings them up, but only to reduce the relationship between father and son to kind of utilitarian form of interdependence for ulterior or other purposes. So that's the first thing that struck us today. Now, I think therein already lies a kind of perspective to help us understand what the little way is, because we are born into this world utterly dependent on our parents for everything. We think about St. Augustine's Confessions, where he recognizes that as well. We're utterly dependent beings. And I think in one way, the little way is simply a deeper understanding and continuation in living out dependency on God in one way. That is to say that we have to know ourselves to be childlike and to be little. One, because it's true, no good that we do is in fact done by us. It is, in a way, only done and ever done with the help of God. So we are dependent upon goodness, the goodness of God, the mercy of God. So the little way is the little way in which we recognize, on the one hand, as a general category of a way of living out the pursuit of holiness, that we are dependent upon God's grace and God's actions in our life. More specifically, it's to live childlike simplicity, to humble ourselves, and humility is never something that contradicts knowledge. Humility is not ignorance. Humility is actually a truth about ourselves. To know ourselves as God knows us, to know ourselves as we truly are, that is what humility is all about, intellectually speaking. So, what is the little way? The little way is to humble ourselves, to recognize all the small, not the grand ways, but the small ways of living out love of God and neighbor through little sacrifices that remain hidden, that we don't pronounce to the world as having taken place, but that remain hidden, just like she was hidden behind the walls of Carmel. So that to have in front of us, have St. Therese's way in front of us, to look at someone who's known herself to be small, who's made herself small, and then taking all the small opportunities to offer acts of sacrifice, which in her mind are acts of love to God. The little way of living holiness and living towards holiness is not, as she always says, to be a St. Therese of Avila, and accomplishing grand things visible for all the world to see, but rather to accomplish little things, little sacrifices, to make love grow, but by little acts of self-denial, self-abandonment, and so purify oneself of oneself, cleanse oneself of oneself, so that really God can be fully live in us. Not I, but that God live in me. And I think that is that is the little way, which is always, the little way is a way that, it's a way, it leads to something. What does it lead to? It leads to God by becoming holy. Yeah. And she recognizes that she is unlike the rose of a Saint Therese of Avila. She is a little flower, more like a daisy, she says, yeah, more like small flowers. That her life is still an ambitious life is something that I would think is really fascinating. So she is not resigning herself simply, look, I'm never a lily, I'm never a rose. Why she says that is so, she is still ambitious. She says, I want to become a saint. That's the greatest ambition that we all could have and should have. And she wanted, and she wants that, as she says, when we think about the flowers, any flower, she said that any of the flowers are perfect as this or that particular flower. A beautiful daisy is a perfect daisy. A beautiful rose is a perfect rose. And she had that ambition for sanctity, the ambition to be the most beautiful flower that she could be. And she gives that example of her sister explaining to her how it is that God favors one person more than another, why there are greater saints and lesser saints, why there are greater persons and lesser persons. And her sister, I don't remember which one of them it is, that gives her the famous example of the various cups, right? So she has, Therese has her own little thimble, and the sister gets her father's big mug and fills them both up with water, and we all know this, yes, fills them both up with water and says, tell me, which of those cups is more fuller than the other? Well, obviously they're both full. This is an image of perfection and completion. So that yes, the little way is the way of the thimble being filled with the water of love and perfection through little acts of sacrifices. Again, it's a way that leads to somewhere. It leads to heaven. Her writing is full with desire for heaven and union with God. And when she says, what is heaven? She says, heaven is love. And what is love? Love is being united with the beloved. Yeah. So the little way, again, is the way of a small person, not called to great acts, but called to little acts and pursuing holiness through those little acts for the sake of union with God in heaven.